What if the fundamental evidence you were taught about evolution, the textbook examples and illustrations, turned out to be misleading, inaccurate, or even outright fraudulent? For over a century, the theory of evolution through natural selection has been portrayed in classrooms as an undeniable fact. But a closer look at the specific claims and drawings used to convince students reveals a startling pattern of misrepresentation. In this documentary, based upon book Rethinking Darwin, published by Bhakti Vikas Trust, we will take a critical lens to some of the most famous icons offered as proof of Darwinian evolution. You may be shocked at how many of these celebrated examples cherry-pick data, omit key facts, and in some cases were clearly fabricated. What does this say about the scientific standards being applied when the evolution controversy continues to spark such fierce debate? Segment 1. Origins Oversimplified. The Miller-Urey experiment in 1953 was hailed at the time as dramatically simulating the origin of life by recreating conditions of the early Earth and producing amino acids, the building blocks of life. This was portrayed as the first step in a predictable sequence from molecules to man through evolution. However, we now know that the atmospheric conditions used by Miller and Urey did not accurately reflect the volcanic gases and non-reducing environment of the primordial Earth. When the experiment is performed with more geologically realistic starting conditions, no amino acids or building blocks form. Yet biology textbooks continue to tout the Miller-Urey experiment as evidence for how life could spontaneously arise without giving students the full context. They also fail to inform students that over 60 years later, origin of life researchers still cannot explain how amino acids could have formed the first self-replicating system, a process they acknowledge is regulated by a staggering terra incognita. Segment 2. Faking Ancestors. Ontogeny recapitulates phylogeny. This idea that embryos relive their evolutionary ancestry was once considered powerful proof of shared ancestral origins across species. The most famous representation was a series of drawings by German embryologist Ernst Haeckel, purporting to show vertebrate embryos looking essentially identical in early stages before diverging into their specialized forms. These drawings were absolutely celebrated as direct observational evidence confirming Darwin's theory of descent from a common ancestor. There was just one problem. Haeckel's drawings were admittedly faked, with the earliest embryonic stages omitted or the similarities artificially exaggerated. This was known as early as the late 1800s, but the drawings continue to be reproduced uncritically in modern textbooks. British embryologist Michael Richardson stated, "It looks like it's turning out to be one of the most famous fakes in biology." Yet this faked icon continues misleading students, apparently due to its pedagogical usefulness in convincing them of evolutionary theory. Segment 3. Problematic Processes. At the core of neo-Darwinian theory is the idea that mutations in DNA, acted upon by natural selection, drove the gradual transformation of microbes into humans and every form of complex life we see today. But just how adequate are these proposed mechanisms? We know that while mutations do occur randomly through mistakes in DNA replication, the vast majority have no beneficial effect. Most are neutral, having no impact, and many others are demonstrably harmful or even lethal to the organism. The rare examples cited as showing evolution in action through mutation, like bacterial resistance to antibiotics or sickle cell resistance to malaria in humans, involve fairly minor modifications, not the kind of introduction of vast new genetic information and complexity required to turn a fish into an amphibian or a chimp into a human. Furthermore, despite literally trillions of organisms like bacteria, with rapid reproduction cycles being observed over decades, not a single instance of one species evolving into another through mutation and selection has been documented. As molecular biologist Jonathan Wells puts it, speciation, whether in the remote Galapagos, in the laboratory cages of the Drosophilists, or in the crowded sediments of the paleontologists, still has never been traced. Segment 4. Textbook Misconceptions. When examining the specific examples used in textbooks to demonstrate evolutionary concepts, we uncover some startling falsehoods and distortions. The walking with ancestors illustrations of knuckle-dragging ape-like hominids are based on partial fossils and fleshed out with artistic interpretation amounting to speculation. The iconic example of peppered moths camouflaged on pollution-stained tree trunks being preyed on by birds, showing natural selection in action, is entirely fabricated. Those photos came from staged situations. The moths don't even naturally rest on tree trunks and had to be glued into position. Even the venerable example of Darwin's finches, showing beak variations in response to environmental changes on the Galapagos Islands, has been widely misrepresented. The beak changes were temporary fluctuations that reversed. They did not lead to any new species splitting off through reproductive isolation as evolution requires. Segment 5, Philosophical Underpinnings. So why the pattern of distortion and oversimplification when presenting the evidence for evolution to students? Could it be that what is being promoted goes beyond simply scientific findings and into a philosophical agenda of materialism? Many influential evolutionary biologists and science popularizers have made candid statements acknowledging evolution as the plank of a materialistic worldview that discards notions of any intelligent design, divine intervention, or purpose in life's origins. Prominent evolutionist Richard Dawkins proudly declared that Darwin made it possible to be an intellectually fulfilled atheist. While that may be a personal philosophical viewpoint, should it be enshrined in science curricula as unquestionable fact? When faked drawings, omitted data, and even fictional examples are necessary to convince students of evolution's material origin story, does this not undermine scientific integrity and open inquiry? There appears to be a battle between two worldviews being waged through the presentation of evidence in textbooks. As we have seen through this critical examination, many of the most widely taught examples and depictions of evolution in textbooks turn out to be demonstrably false, misleading, or faked outright. Fudging of the scientific data appears widespread when it comes to this particular theory. From deceptive drawings of embryos to finch beak variations, misportrayed as speciation events, from fabricated examples like peppered moths to the oversimplification of the origins of life, the pattern is clear. Evolution is being given a free pass from the burden of evidence required for other scientific claims. This disturbing trend raises serious concerns about the role of philosophical materialism underpinning certain scientific conclusions and influencing how evidence is curated and presented to students. When fakes and falsehoods are necessary to convince students of a theory's validity, have we strayed from the principles of unbiased empirical inquiry that define the scientific method? It is time we had the courage to separate the real science from the materialistic philosophy being promoted under its cover. Subscribe to our channel for more upcoming episodes. You can also purchase the book Rethinking Darwin by visiting our website books.bvks.com.